Wait, are you guys still there or are we just being quiet?
We're
I'm
here.
still here.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, assalamu alaikum everyone. Thanks so much for the folks who've joined us on time. We'll just be giving a few more minutes to let our other attendees get settled in and then we'll get started. Thanks again for everyone who's joined us. We'll be beginning just shortly. All right, Bissell, I think it's been enough time. We'd love to get started and keep on track. Thank you so much for everyone who's joined late this evening today. We really appreciate your time. So here's an agenda and what you can expect on our webinar today. We're gonna kick things off on this session with some introductions. We're gonna talk about the Million Muslim Votes campaign and then talk some more on organizing. We're gonna shift into the power of storytelling, and then we're gonna hear from our keynote, Dr. Syra Madad. We'll have some time for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up our session today. So, hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aisha Ahmed. That's me there on the left. And here's my partner, Muhammad on the right. I'm the Deputy National Organizing Director, and he's the National Organizing Director. And together, we're your organizing team at Emgage. Mohammed, I know you're on the line. Did you want to pop in to say hello?
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're really excited to kind of go through what we'll be going through today, inshallah, and really looking forward to, I know many of you have either met me or worked with me, so we're definitely looking forward to kicking off our webinar series, one of many, inshallah, and we'll definitely work to be as helpful as possible as we work together to kind of, turn out 1 million Muslims.
All right. And we definitely want the chance to get to know you a little bit more and for one of you guys to get to know each other. So hit us with your name in the chat box, your organization affiliation, and tell us about the last best dessert you had or a good joke. If you don't know me, you should know that I love to advocate for votes and I love very bad jokes. So we could all use some more laughter in this time. All right, I hope you guys share those jokes with me later on. So, about the campaign. The goal of this campaign is to turn out 1 million Muslim voters in the 2020 elections. It's built on 3 major components, and that's data, building collective power, and developing institutional capacity. When I talk about data, what we really mean here is that we're utilizing a data-driven approach to build voter engagement in our community. And then we're cultivating that data to politically uplift the community. And what this really breaks down is that when my team and I are knocking doors to talk to Muslim voters on a Saturday morning, we are the ones that get to determine who are the high propensity voters or who are the high priority voters that we want to talk to. And that includes Muslims first, because frankly, no one else is building voter engagement lists like we do. Or when we go to meet with our representatives and we're sitting in their offices to advocate for an issue that we're passionate about, and they try to tell us that they are simply prioritizing other issues, aka they don't care. And we can sit back and tell them, you know what, okay, that's cool and all, but we know that there are X many Muslim voters in your district, and they will be paying attention to this vote, and it will be a reminder come election time. It's kind of always funny to see that spark in their, or that flicker in their eye, or their change in tone when when you hit them with that number in the office. The second component in building our collective power. Now that's why we're so thrilled to have our partners on our screen join us in this effort today, because we're here to amplify one another and share our skills and our networks to build together. We're all united in this goal to see Muslim voters turn out, and this is so much more powerful when we accomplish this together. So I hope you'll join me in a virtual round of applause and to really thank these folks, because this campaign would not be possible without y'all today. I'm clapping from here. And then the third major component of this campaign is to develop institutional capacity, so that these efforts that we're building will not only set us up for the 2020 elections, but will continue to succeed us and will continue to thrive in our massages, in our community centers, in our organizations. We're building relationships through our institutions and therefore ensuring our place in the greater American fabric. This campaign is what building power looks like to us. When we're able to bring in sustainability, when we're able to bring in unity, when we're able to define our community on our terms, that is incredibly powerful, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish in this campaign. So let's talk organizing. There's really nothing more daunting, and I know many of you share this experience, when you're walking into a room and there's hardly anyone that matches your face or your beliefs or the languages that we speak, and it's a very common sentiment for many of us in the room. But that's what organizing is about, and what we're trying to change here is the dynamics of those rooms. Organizing isn't a fancy operation, and when you really break it down, it's about getting people together, utilizing creative skills and available resources, and a plan of action for something that you really care about. Our story needs to be in these rooms, and they're not always prioritized. And that's why organizing can be messy and uncomfortable, because the systems that we're fighting and building for never had us in mind initially from the inception. But that's okay, because we're organizing together and we're winning together. Okay. I had planned to share my screen at this part, but technical difficulties are not allowing me to. So I appreciate your flexibility, but I'm going to share a little bit of my own personal story. So 2 years ago on the eve of Ramadan, I was in DC and I had just finished my usual phone call with my parents. I told them what I had prepared for breakfast and suhoor. I had fresh berries and vanilla yogurt, avocado toast, and some sweet dates and juice ready to go. And as usual, my dad had closed off the phone with a jolly smile. And I love that smile of his. It just made you feel good inside. I returned to my friends on the patio, and we relaxed as we enjoyed the summer evening, wondering what all was to come in that month. A normal evening for me. But the next day was anything but normal when I found myself in Indiana in a hospital holding my father's hand, dressed in a gown and wires all around him. That day, he was diagnosed with a cancer known as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And as a result of the tumor in his spine, he was paralyzed from that day on. We were caught in a battle for 375 days, our family, but Allah had other plans. He passed away last year on the last Friday of Ramadan. The months that followed were draining, but I had never expected my mailbox to become one of my biggest pains, because the mailbox brought bills. Bills of 200, bills of 20,000, bills of 14,000, bills of 3,000, and the list goes on today. I'd often look down at my hands. SubhanAllah, our hands can do so much, but I'd ask, why are you just sitting there? Why don't you do something to help put an end to this madness? What's the magic trick to make green paper appear in my hands right now? What do I sell? What do I get rid of? Maybe there's something, maybe I should look in the house again. There might be some paper I overlooked that would make all this go away. But no matter what I said, my hands didn't answer me. Helplessness was what I felt. A deep, dark, twisting your insides kind of helplessness. And unfortunately, this isn't a rare story. In fact, today, over 79 million Americans hold a total of $81 billion in past due medical debt. That means that 1 in every 6 Americans are also looking down, hoping for something to appear in their hands. 1 in 6 Americans are hoping that the numbers in their bank account will flip around to be in a better state. 1 in every 6 Americans is experiencing that deep, dark, twisting your inside kind of helplessness. In fact, on the Zoom call alone, there may be at least 16 people who will also be carrying medical debt. Indiana law states that if a resident dies, it's upon the surviving spouse to pay any remaining medical fees owed. If you believe that this law is unfair, if you believe that families like mine should not be forced to suffer through any more helplessness, I need you to contact your representatives to help pass H1234. It will do 3 things. It will eliminate the $81 billion in past due medical debt. It will end abusiveness and harassing debt collection practices. And it will reform the existing bankruptcy court system to provide relief for those with burdensome medical debt. American families deserve quality and affordable health care, and they deserve it now. So you see, the power of storytelling really builds in the heart of organizing. I'm not in front of you, I may not know some of you, but I feel that we may have connected in a way that you would have never imagined. My issue suddenly becomes your issue. And this art of storytelling is really what drives people to act. It's what brings people out to canvas on a 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. That's what brings in community members to make calls to strangers day after day after day, because they can see you and they understand you at a heart-to-heart level. And when we're able to do this and effectively share our stories, there's so much more that we can accomplish. So not only do I want to walk us through the power and what storytelling can accomplish, I want to share those tools with you too. As taught by Harvard Kennedy School professor Marshall Gans, there's a great tool that bridges our story to our communities. And it brings our stories in mini stories, and in developing the story of self, and developing the story of us, and in developing the story of now. Essentially, this formula helps you demonstrate to others why I'm passionate about what I'm passionate about, and why you're passionate too, and what can we do together, because we are all passionate about the same thing. There's obviously a lot of passion involved, but we're gonna break it down and walk through this step by step. So the story of self, and explaining why I'm passionate about what I'm passionate about. I demonstrated this in my story when I talked about how I'm passionate about healthcare reform, because after 375 days of struggle, I do not want to struggle a single day more because of threatening medical debt. This was a challenge, a life lesson, a struggle, an outcome that shaped me and my passion and how it began. And then we bridge into the story of us. Now, where my issue becomes your issue, and how do I build a bridge from me to you and your loved ones? I drew this in my story when I mentioned that a total of 79 million Americans 1 in every 6 Americans holds a total debt of $81 billion in past due medical debt. I did this when I talked about that moment when you're looking into your hands and you feel that deep, dark, twisting your insides kind of helplessness. Suddenly, you can understand what I'm talking about. And then the now, the story of now, and wrapping it up and bringing us to action and why we need to act today. And what that action is that we can take together because we've built that community now. And in my story, the action was to contact your representatives so that Americans like you and me will never experience that same kind of helplessness. And all American families deserve quality and affordable health care. And when you keep in mind this magic formula and you're able to master the art of storytelling, and trust me, it's a process, and I still struggle with it today, and it's an emotional and it's an authentic process, and not every story has to be as personal as mine, but when you're able to do that and share and be loud and proud and apologetic and who you are, what you stand for, we can do this. We can carve out our own places in historical buildings that never imagined we'd be there today. So this bottom left picture was taken at the U.S. Capitol. We can advocate for the issues, and we can protest for the rights and for the rights of ourselves and our communities and our allied communities. We can gather as a voting bloc and show up loud and proud. We can support candidates. Oh, I apologize. We can support the candidates that we believe in and look like us and share those same values. And then we have the power to go from 1 to thousands. Storytelling is incredibly powerful, and it's something that we can all carry with us in our organizing efforts from here on out. I'm going to take a pause here because I covered a lot and see if there's any questions that have arisen in the meantime. Okay, I would just like to check if Dr. Syra Madad is on the call with us at this time, because we'd love to introduce her and shift it over to her so we can see some storytelling in action.
Syra is not on yet. She will be joining here shortly. This is, again, Mohammed Gula. Thank you, Aisha, for really kicking us off. I think that a lot of what you've shared is really the number one most important piece, especially as a Muslim American who is doing so much organizing. And as I kind of look at a lot of the attendees and panelists I know here and on our Facebook Live, I've worked with just about every single one of you guys, or had conversations with every single one of you guys. And everyone has shared a different story with me in regards to what issues are most important to the communities that we serve. And so as organizers, it's extremely important for us to kind of take some time to really recognize that Muslim issues are American issues, and American issues are Muslim issues. And because of what has kind of been going on, especially in the environment and in the climate that we're in today, recognizing why we are passionate about what makes us passionate and what wakes us up every single morning to do what we have to do. For some of us, the work that we do is not our full-time job. In many ways, this is really what we do on our spare time. And then for others, this is exactly what we want to do for the rest of our lives and moving forward. Nusayba, thank you. Nusayba is thanking you for your story, Aisha, and sharing it. But like Aisha, I think that it's also important, and this is something I think earlier on, I actually learned later on in life, where sharing your vulnerabilities, and this is something that Aisha did very well, sharing your vulnerabilities with the rest of the American public is some of the most important pieces to really reaching out to others and organizations that might experience some of the same struggles that we as Muslim Americans experience. And so I really wanted to uplift and really just recognize the importance of understanding, not only to tell your own story, which is a part of the teaching, not only to share your own story, but also to bring in how your story kind of folds into the overall American story. And we all have our different ways of doing that. But the importance of it is really key to making sure that as we're moving and as we're organizing within our communities, that we are recognized. And I see Nusayba's hand up. Nusayba, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. One moment. All right, you should be live.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you to Aisha for sharing your personal story. It's very impactful, very meaningful. I was the national Muslim organizer for Bernie, so I appreciated your photo also of the Bernie, in the middle of the presentation of the Bernie rally, where you spoke. And I think that, like you said, there's a lot of issues that affect the Muslim community that are also tied to the general American population. And it's really important to find those issues. So, when I was in college was that my good friend who lived less than a mile away from me, who was also a fellow activist and community organizer and involved in all the same things I was. And we would see each other, at events. One day he shared with me that he was food insecure. And I was shocked, because you really never know who is impacted by, food insecurity. Like, you don't know who's going to sleep hungry. And this is, mind you, a person who had other Muslim roommates who even didn't know that he was struggling with this. So yeah, exactly. So, we just have to pay attention to the people around us. And I think that's a really important factor to talk to each other and connect with each other. And I think this is a really beautiful moment to do it while we're actually in quarantine, because I'm calling people and texting people who I haven't talked to in a really long time. So reconnecting with people, like, this is kind of giving us the opportunity to reconnect with people who we may not have connected with in a while, or people who we see but we don't actually sit down with and say, hey, what are you struggling with? What's going on right now? This is a really good time to text people who live in your community, who are part of your community, and be like, hey, can I get you groceries? Do you need anything? And sometimes we don't think about it. We really don't think about it. We think everyone's getting their groceries, everyone's using their instant cart or whatever, and not everyone has the luxury. That's just the plain fact. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of Muslims struggle with poverty, that we don't know, that we know there's a lot of affluent people in our community. We don't know that there's actually a lot more working class people. And so right now, a lot of us are struggling. We're living paycheck to paycheck. Obviously, we're losing jobs. So it's a really important time to connect with each other and ask each other what we're struggling with. And sorry, I think I took a little more time than I expected. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
No, never apologize. And we're so thrilled to have you join us. Really have been applauding your work from afar and supporting you. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. And I think your reminder is incredibly important and needed. And I think I guess why I was also sharing that part of my story where you look down at your hands and you have that feeling of helplessness, because this time of COVID-19 has just really brought us in a new situation that we haven't experienced before. And although it might be helpless in some instances, it's also very inspirational to kind of see the folks that are coming out on the front lines. And that's why, we're even so more thrilled that Dr. Syra Madad, and she's on with us now. We had the chance to see her be so unapologetic on a major platform like Netflix. And she's on the front lines, and she's kind of a hidden gem of our community that we hope will become a public and recognized gem too. So I'm just going to do a quick intro to Dr. Syra, and we'll get started to hear from our keynote. Dr. Syra Madad is a nationally recognized leader in public health. She is New York City's health system senior director of the system-wide special pathogens program, where Dr. Madad has been helping lead New York City's response to this pandemic. She was also recently featured in the Netflix series Pandemic and launched a global health center early last year. Dr. Syra Madad, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, as wonderful as can be, but I'm super thrilled to have you join us today. I know 11-year-old Aisha would be just jumping for joy when you see a name that I can connect with, or that sounds more similar to the ones that I know on TV. Like, that is just so exciting. And then the work you're doing, of course, is just phenomenal. Your accomplishments and achievements just go on.
Oh, thank you so much for your kind words. I think, all of us, do our own thing. So there's so many people, in our community, and obviously the colleagues that we know of, and just generally friends that, have amazing expertise, and everyone is, making this world a better place in their own way. So I'm certainly very happy to play a small part in that.
Oh my gosh, well, wonderful. I don't want to take any more time. Your time is extremely valuable to us, and I know there's quite a few questions loaded up for you. So the Zoom floor is yours. We'd love to hear about your story and what brought you here today. What are you experiencing and seeing in this time of COVID? What can we do to prepare? Really anything you have to share with us. We are so thrilled to hear from you today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thank you for the opportunity and for having me on. I'm certainly always happy to spread education and any tips, any kind of knowledge that I have. If I can impart any of that onto others, it's certainly very valuable. So, this is, what I'm going to be saying is very, it's not organized or structured in any presentation or any way, but I figured I'll just share a little bit of kind of my own background and story, what got me into kind of special pathogens, and talking a little bit more about obviously this current pandemic that has taken over the world, if you will, and offering just some tips and some suggestions as obviously we embark upon the holy month of Ramadan that is obviously coming very soon. We know obviously it's a very important time for Muslims around the world, and living through a pandemic, and then obviously wanting to continue on our religious duties is obviously a difficult situation, but certainly there is some solace in it, and I'm happy to kind of provide whatever suggestions that I may have. So just kind of starting from the very beginning, when we talk about special pathogens, I'm going to define the term because I know it's something new to individuals. What is a special pathogen? Is this something like, Zika, or is this something like Ebola? And so special pathogens is really, it's a niche field, if you will. And it's a small community. A lot of us obviously know each other. We know who's in this particular field, if you will. And special pathogens, basically, it's a set of criteria that can define what a special pathogen is. And this includes, an infectious disease that is highly infectious. It's associated with high morbidity and high mortality. It has a high likelihood of secondary cases, so person-to-person transmission. There's no treatment for it, no vaccine available. It can cause a lot of public fear and anxiety. And so those are just some of the criteria that, can fit the bill of what a special pathogen is. And so some examples of a special pathogen are your viral hemorrhagic fevers like Ebola and Lassa fever and Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. And then you have your severe respiratory diseases like MERS, SARS, and, you know, you can, in a part, you know, put COVID-19 in that bucket as well. So, you know, it's a field that requires, you know, a lot of, you know, expertise in a sense, and a lot of, you know, just knowing what to do, a lot of background in just epidemiology, infectious disease, and basic infection control, really, because everything goes back to basic infection control. Just in the past few years, you know, some of the outbreaks that, you know, I've worked on, you know, just I would say within the past 5-6 years, you know, everyone probably remembers Ebola in 2014, 2016, and, you know, just the amount of chaos it had caused, not just overseas, but also here in the United States. It certainly changed the way healthcare services were offered for travel-related infectious diseases, and a lot of us changed, you know, our processes, and we're able to augment our daily, you know, continuum of care, if you will, and bringing in, you know, how to respond to these highly infectious diseases with a core foundation. I was part of the Ebola response team down in Texas. And now, unfortunately, as you may know, we are living through the second largest Ebola outbreak, you know, in history, what's happening in DRC, and kind of, you know, the flames that are constantly happening over there. But also, you know, recently, I'm sure people remember, Zika was also very big in the headlines. Measles here in New York City, we just, you know, came over an epidemic here in New York City of measles. So a lot has happened just in the past few years when we talk about infectious diseases. And so, you know, before Netflix and before I starred in this Netflix series, you know, my day-to-day job obviously is preparing for these types of events. And when I say prepare, we're constantly putting together processes, strategies. We're training frontline healthcare workers. You know, we're putting we're investing a lot in preparedness, but also in the response phase and also in the recovery phase. And so we know that these are not one-off events. You know, just because, you know, you had Zika and it's done with, it doesn't mean it's not going to come back. And so there's always this cycle of continuous preparedness. And, you know, by default, when we talk about the goal of disaster preparedness, you know, it's really to lessen the impact of the disaster, if you will, whether it's an infectious disease outbreak, whether it's a hurricane or a coastal storm. We want to obviously make sure we are lessening the impact of this disaster. And even more importantly, if we can mitigate and prevent it from happening. And that becomes obviously much more difficult because you need a lot more resources and infrastructure in place. And so part of one of the things that I would love to see, you know, with the COVID-19 and after this is all done with, is that we invest a lot more in preparedness, and we invest a lot more in these resources and infrastructures that we need to help for the next pandemic that's going to come down, you know, in the pipeline. We know what's going to happen. We just need to make sure that we're constantly learning the lessons from each epidemic and we're applying it to future epidemics. That's not to say every outbreak is the same. COVID-19 is something that obviously we've never experienced before. It is, you know, exposing a lot of vulnerabilities in our, not just in our healthcare system, but society at large. And so you're probably seeing a lot in the headlines of, you know, earlier on, there were reports in China that the high-risk individuals are those with comorbidities, those that obviously are in the higher age risk group. And that is true. They are obviously very vulnerable. They are in the high risk, but no one is invincible. We're also seeing a lot of people, you know, younger than 50 getting infected and having severe outcomes, and it's extremely unfortunate. So there's a lot that goes on in terms of looking at the epidemiology and the impact that an infectious disease can have on society. So you can see obviously in Italy, you know, the devastation that it has caused, and it's continuing to impact, you know, the lives of individuals there, and certainly here in America. But one of the factors that's also coming into play is, you know, the overall age of the population here in the United States. You know, when we talk about additional comorbidities and additional underlying conditions, we have an obesity epidemic here in the United States. And we're actually seeing that play out in COVID-19, having an effect in the cases of some of these individuals, unfortunately. We're also seeing health disparities. You know, it's amplifying socioeconomic factors that we have. You know, the huge factor that we have here, you know, it's no accident, it's not by coincidence that, you know, one of the first hospitals in New York City that was overwhelmed was Elmhurst Hospital, which is part of our health system, New York City Health and Hospitals that I work for. The reason why I say it's no accident is because, you know, that particular area in the borough of Queens is extremely diverse. It's one of the most diverse urban areas in the United States, actually. And what you're seeing is a lot of individuals have generational families living together. So you have a 2-bedroom apartment, but you have 15 people living there. So when you talk about social distancing and staying 6 feet apart, it's extremely hard to do that when you are, very, very close together in close corridors, if you will. On top of that, you're also having these individuals that hold a lot of essential jobs. So these are the individuals that have to go out, like to the grocery store, and they're our clerks, they're driving taxis, they're our bus drivers and MTA and things like that. So they hold these essential jobs. It's obviously putting them also at higher risk of contracting the disease. And then obviously the comorbidities and the health outcomes, and underlying causes obviously is also playing a big factor in all of this. But at the end of the day, what it's also revealing, as I mentioned, is these health disparities, and how if we really want to address the next pandemic and even this pandemic, we really need to look at some of these underlying causes, because you can't fix a broken system if you're not going to look into some of the factors that's causing it to become broken. And to have such a big influence on the lives of everybody. So we really need to make sure that we're looking at some of these factors. And then in addition to these health disparities, you're also looking at the underinsured and those that obviously have no insurance. That's playing a huge part as well, access to healthcare services. And so, just a couple more, tips and a little bit more about COVID. So where are we in the sense of where are we with this COVID pandemic? We still are seeing widespread transmission, here in New York City, where the epicenter in the United States, cases are continuing to grow. While you're seeing that plateau, the plateau doesn't necessarily mean that the cases are not growing. They are growing. We are seeing more cases every day, just not as many as we saw last week, if you will. And at the same time, when we say this plateau, we're surging at a very high level. And so our hospitals are extremely busy. A lot happening. We're seeing a lot of devastation in this pandemic, something, again, that no one has ever been prepared for, no one experienced before. We're running a marathon and we're running a sprint at the same time. So it's very difficult. This plateau that we're in, we know that we're going to be in it for some time. We don't know the timeline. We don't know the time period. It could be weeks, it could be months. Not exactly sure. We're hoping we can make it to the other side, but in order for us to make it to the other side, we need the cooperation of everybody. So not just, those that are in the high risk category, but every single one of us obviously is contributing to flattening this curve. And this is why it's important, obviously in Ramadan that's coming around the corner, we know that this is a time of year that people want to come together. They want to go to the mosque, they want to pray more. They want to see family members, the whole 9 yards. I do it every year. I'm a Pakistani American Muslim, and so Ramadan is something very big also, in my household, of how we all come together. We all go to the masjid often and pray. So it's difficult that we're not able to do that, given obviously the fact that everybody is in shelter in place, if you will. But it's very important to abide by these public health regulations, because it's not just about you, right? And so I'm sure you've heard it so many times. I'm sure you've heard of it's not just about you. I'm sure you've heard of flattening the curve, and I'm sure you've heard of social distancing. And I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing about all these things. But it's so important because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and our behavior is really what can influence this pandemic and the trajectory of this pandemic. So if you go out and you congregate unnecessarily, you're going to then create new chains of transmission. And this new chain of transmission, you don't know where it's going to lead to. And what I mean by that is, the cases that we're seeing today in the hospitals are the individuals that got infected, a couple of weeks ago. And so you may not be able to visibly see this new chain of transmission that you may start off just by coming together, but inevitably you will start it, unfortunately, if somebody is vulnerable, and all of us are vulnerable because nobody has immunity to this virus. It's completely new. So it's very important to abide by these public health measures, because it just takes that one person, to start that outbreak, to start that new chain of transmission. We really want to make sure that doesn't happen. We want to make sure that people are staying indoors, abiding by these public health regulations. But at the same time, when we want to, stay healthy, stay holy type of thing, this is a time for us to make new traditions. As painful as it may be of not seeing family, not going to the mosque, it's also a great opportunity to seize the moment and start new traditions. Take the time that we have to pray more, to connect with people, you know, remotely. You know, with me personally, Ramzan obviously is a very busy time, because we're obviously still working. We still have to do our day jobs, and we still want to fast, and we still want to, you know, create, put together that, you know, iftar, the beautiful iftar, you know, in the evening. It's very hard because life is so busy. And usually every year for me, you know, one of the things I do with my kids is we have this calendar, and every day they take out a note from the calendar, and they have to do a good deed. But as soon as they read it, we have to run out the door because I have to drop them off to school. I have to go to work, you know, and we come back, and sometimes I forget to even ask, do they do that good deed? And so now, you know, it's given me an opportunity to, you know, spend a little bit more time with, you know, my kids, to explain to them what is Ramzan, why are we doing this good deed, you know, giving them a little bit more of that storytelling, if you will. At the same time, you know, mommy still has to go to work, but it's, you know, I still have to, it's giving me some more time to spend with my family. So, you know, I'll stop there and see if anyone has, you know, any questions. You know, the last thing that I'll mention in terms of trajectory, we don't know, obviously, the timeline of when this is going to end. We know that this too shall pass. There will be light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not tomorrow. It's not the week after. The reason why I say that is because, you know, putting my epi hat on again, we don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to lift these social distancing restrictions. We don't have the testing in place. We don't have the manpower to be able to do the contact tracing. You know, there's so much more that goes into all of these types of decisions. And unfortunately, we're just not there yet. And this decision is made at the local level. So what we're experiencing here in New York City is very different than what somebody may be experiencing in Ohio. And so, you know, wherever you are, just make sure that you're abiding by your local public health department's, you know, recommendations. And, you know, in terms of just general tips, you know, whether it's Ramzan or whether it's, you know, not Ramzan, again, don't congregate. Continue these individual measures that public health keep talking about in terms of hand hygiene, covering your cough, the respiratory etiquette, self-isolation at home, going out only for essential services, you know, and looking out for one another. So those are extremely, you know, important things that obviously go a long way. And it is us that is really helping flattening the curve. It's not, you know, an elected official waving a magical wand and it's flattening the curve. It's all of us working together to flatten this curve. And really, we're saving lives just by doing so. So let's continue to save lives, and let's continue to obviously, you know, be diligent in our, you know, in the month that is going to come upon us, this holy month, and continue to practice. But at the same time, continue to stay safe. So with that, I'm certainly happy to take some questions and stop there.
Woo! Thank you, Dr. Syra. Thank you again for the education on it. We do have a couple questions here, and I am cognizant of your time. And so one of the first questions, a majority of the folks that we have on today, they are organizers. They're working within their communities. And, you know, your day-to-day job, as you know, we saw through some of the episodes, is really based on advocating for something that will happen in the future, and sometimes does not show, or you're not really able to show the tangible, solid solution. How do you really persevere through that? I think that we as a Muslim community kind of go through some of those same attributes and go through some of those same difficulties of trying to make, you know, our issues priority. And that's a part of what we all do. But I mean, the same thing. I think the craziest part when we first spoke was the fact that everything that you said online during that time, you know, COVID didn't even happen, but you were saying exactly everything that would happen. So if you could talk about kind of the perseverance that you had and how you kind of persevered through those moments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, in the beginning, you know, we're preparing for something that we don't know will happen, or we know it will happen, we don't know when it'll happen. And it's hard for, you know, individuals to buy into that, you know, so we have a number of priorities that are more visible. You know, we have a number of issues that we need to work on, and we're focusing on something that is not here yet, but we know that it may have a catastrophic outcome to it. So it's very hard to kind of grapple with that thought in and of itself. But a lot of what I do is not just risk-based, but it's consequence-based. And so when I talk about buy-in and when I talk about why I do what I do, I do a lot with kind of with the lens of the consequence. And so I'll give you an example. One of the things that we do often is, we do secret chopper drills. Right? So we send in a fake patient to our emergency department, and we look at what outbreak is happening around the world. And let's just take measles, for example. So we've done this for measles. And maybe many of you may not know, but measles is one of the most highly infectious diseases known to man. And we have a number of countries that still have a measles outbreak even today, right? So if you look at the World Health Organization's website, over 150 countries are still reporting in, measles cases. That's, it's a staggering number. And as we know, it just takes that one person to get on a flight and then start an outbreak somewhere else. And so that shows you how vulnerable we are and how connected we are in this globalized world. And so in this secret choppers, we look at some of the infectious disease outbreaks happening around the world at that given time. And there's so many, even today, if you go on, for example, promed.com, you see the different cases of different infectious diseases happening this moment. And COVID obviously is taking over the headline, but that's not to say that rabies doesn't exist. That's not to say tuberculosis and malaria and Lassa fever are not happening. Those are happening. They're just not making it to the headlines. And so when we send in this patient, we're looking at the preparedness level of our facility to see, well, how long does it take to identify this patient through travel history? How long does it take to isolate this patient? How long does it take to inform public health authorities? And when we do well, it's great. We want to continue to maintain that state of readiness. And when we don't do well, what we do is we talk and look at where our gaps are, and we have a consequence-based approach. If that patient was real, if that patient did have measles and walked in through that door and there were 50 patients in that waiting area and it took them 30 or 1 hour to actually get a room, so they've been sitting in that waiting area for over an hour, they've now exposed every single person in that in that particular emergency department. Some may have immunity, some may not. And so we're looking at the consequence of it. And so this is the consequence. Because of this one patient, these are how many people they potentially exposed. This is what we're looking at. And then people, are like, oh my God, this is something we absolutely need to do, because if this was a real patient, this is what would happen. We don't want to be in that situation. And so that's what was happening a lot beforehand. And now, obviously, living through this, it's a completely different approach, because now what I'm doing is, it's going at a pace that I've never imagined. It's exhausting, but it's also very fulfilling. You want to give the support, you want to give the resources to our frontline staff, you want to provide the education, you want to be there for them. And so there's a lot of that happening. And I really want to give credit to where credit is due. Our doctors and our healthcare workers, and even our janitors, and those that are serving meals in the cafeteria. These are all frontline people. These are all people that are putting themselves at risk every single day going to work, whether you're treating a patient with COVID-19 or serving them a meal or cleaning their room. All of us are playing a role in it, and it's a central role. But this is really showing you how humanity is really coming together to fight for the greater good, and we just need to continue fighting that good fight.
Thank you for that. And actually, the next question, I think, is an extremely important question from Nusayba. How do we educate and prepare Black and Brown communities who are skeptical about the severity of the disease? And I know you kind of hit on that a little bit, more so about the skepticism, but given that their communities were kind of impacted by like Tuskegee and other kind of American policies, especially since they would be like most prone to the disease.
So that's a good question. And similar to, as I mentioned, we all have a role to play in terms of affecting the trajectory of this outbreak in terms of our behaviors and staying home. We also have a role to play in educating our community. So, what goes along with education is knowing where to get that education, knowing where to get the facts. And I get text messages all the time from my own family members, my own aunts and uncles, and oftentimes, the most recent one I got was stating, "Oh, just drink a lot of lemon water, you'll be fine," or just boil some garlic and put some turmeric in it, and you're fine, and you can go out and do your business. And that's unfortunately a very risky mentality. And so we want to make sure we are educating our own community. And in order for us to educate our own community, we first obviously need to make sure we have the facts straight. And so all of us also play a role in keeping others informed and going to credible sources. And so, you know, making sure that our aunts and uncles and our community members have the most up-to-date information, and they know what's happening around them, and they know what they can do to protect themselves and protect those that are around them. And so, you know, it's a lot about educating yourself. And then in order for you to educate yourself, going to these credible sources like the CDC website, going to your public health department's website, reading credible scientific journals. There's so much out there, unfortunately, and I've mentioned in a number of different media outlets, you know, we're battling not just the pandemic itself, the actual infectious disease, but also this contagion of misinformation. And it's so much, and it's constant. And it's very hard for people to sometimes to differentiate between what is true and what is not. And a lot of times things seem like they're true. One of the things, you know, I had recently gotten asked was, you know, in Ramzan, we're hearing that you should drink a lot of water because, you know, water helps moisten your mucous membranes, it keeps you hydrated, and it lessens your chances of getting COVID. That is absolutely not true. There's no scientific evidence behind that, you know? So to provide, you know, saying these types of things and giving this type of advice, it's actually undermining the scientific community. So keeping hydrated, yes, that's important, but that's not going to reduce your risk of contracting COVID-19. One doesn't have anything to do with the other in that sense, in terms of the transmission of the disease or your likelihood of getting infected. The tried and true strategies still stand. Covering your cough, staying home if you're sick, washing your hands, you know, just obviously not exposing yourself. And so just, again, making sure that you're educated, and then you can educate the community around you.
Thank you so much. I know that you do have to go. We have about 3 other questions, but what we'll do is I'll definitely write those down. We'll send it over to you and try to work with you on getting an answer and then sharing it with the group. I just kind of wanted to take this moment to thank you so much for your time. It was very refreshing to hear your story, as well as, you know, obviously seeing you on the screen and you sharing the space of sharing the story of your family and what you felt and what you kind of experienced through your job. So we thank you so much, of course, for joining us. And we definitely look forward to being as quarantined as possible, and making sure that we all do our part. Aisha, I'll kick it off to you.
Yeah, really. Thank you so much, Dr. Syra. Appreciate it so much.
No, thank you so much for having me, and stay healthy, everybody, and stay holy.
Inshallah. I mean, best of luck in your future efforts.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, so we just had a really phenomenal chance to hear from Dr. Syra firsthand, and also hear a little bit about her story and some of the work that she does and tips and tricks that she has to share in the coming month and the time of Ramadan. So thank you so much for everyone's questions. We're gonna just wrap it up here a little bit with some final. Does anyone want to share anything that was compelling from Dr. Syra's story that really stood out? And keeping in mind what we've talked about in building or organizing our efforts and in developing that story of self lesson now. Would love to hear from folks on the call. Oof, and I apologize for screen flipping on you.
If you'd like to share, please just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Nishat, I unmuted you.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, we can hear you. How's it going?
This is Nishat.
Hi, Nishat.
I'm just
Yeah.
listening.
Oh, okay. So you didn't have any question or anything?
No, I didn't. I'm listening to you guys ardently.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I think there's a lot to process here from her story, and she brought up a lot of different components for our community, and then even outside and structurally society, different disparities, and filling different gaps. I think what really stood out to me is the word consequence based. Um, that I think is a great way to frame what you know what can happen when there's complacency, when there's a lack of action, when there's just that there's just a lack of navigation and moving forward. So, and I know that's something that our communities are experiencing in so many ways, both politically and outside of that, and personally as well too. So, I think consequence based would be a great way to frame some of our activities moving forward. And I know we have quite the folks in the audience, from policymakers to organizers and faith leaders too. So I think it's well into your evening, and we'll wrap it up here a little bit early. But if we could just make a final ask that if this webinar was helpful to you and you are ready to make your pledge to vote today, text voting to 52886. Help encourage others to make their vote today and make that pledge, that commitment. Otherwise, we're going to be seeing more consequence-based outcomes that are the things that we're trying to avoid. And thank you so much again for joining us on this webinar today. And we're going to be hosting another webinar in the coming weeks. This will be in Ramadan, so we're going to host our time a bit earlier, so prior to Iftar, so that you're not hangry. And we'd love to have you guys join us. And we're going to shift the conversation. We'll still continue our storytelling element, but we're going to shift the conversation to other core activities of an organizing operation and how to host voter registration and phone banking and canvassing, and then really being able to move from an ask to action, because anyone can ask you if you're registered to vote or will you come out to call, but how do you hit success and really turn the conversation around. So thank you so much for joining us today. If there's any last thoughts or questions, I want to thank my partners on the call, Muhammad Kula, Hashim Sayed, and other folks who've been supporting today's call. And I want to thank all of our partners once again for being a part of this campaign. And really just want to close it off here. Thanks so much, everyone. Stay safe, stay engaged, and in solidarity, your Emgage team is here for you. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.